Today we talk with Dr. David Minkoff, who is a world-renowned clinician in ozone therapy and lots of other stuff. He has a huge clinic in Clearwater, Florida. And today we discuss a bit about sleep and the importance of that, but we really get into the nitty-gritty on EBOO. So I think it's one of the best interviews I've done on technicals of an ozone therapy and will be really helpful for the patients and the clinicians because we have some pearls in there about, hey, what did you want to know when you were getting into EBOO but didn't know it? So he gives lots of pearls out, and I think this is a fantastic interview, so enjoy. Thanks so much for joining today, Dr. Minkoff. It's always a pleasure to talk to you, one of the most renowned ozone experts in the United States and worldwide renowned for your clinic. People are flying in from different countries to come and see you, and you have a massive clinic now. How many staff did you say you're running currently?
75 staff right now.
That's incredible. And I know that's got to be largely due to the patient results that you guys are getting. I mean, it just attracts so many people. And you kind of hit on a little bit earlier with what your vision is for your clinic and the work you're doing. What would you say that is?
Well, the population is sick and people are sick. And sick people, life's no fun when you're sick. So I'm 74. I've done 43 Ironmans. I'm training for another one for early next summer. I love being physically fit. I love being able to get down on the floor. I've got 8.5 grandchildren, to get down on the floor and play with them or go out in the back and play basketball with them. And I don't have aches and pains. I have plenty of energy. I can work a 50-hour week. And to me, that's fun. And I think people who have no energy and who have pain, then life isn't very fun. And what happens to most people is they get stuck in the sort of clutches, or they buy the model that a drug can make you healthy or can help you. And while I'm not anti-drug in terms of sometimes people need emergency treatment, generally that isn't the way you get there. You get there through the right lifestyle, the right thinking, the right supplements, the right associations, and then a physician who can help you debug your own genetics and your epigenetics so that you can maximize your body and its longevity. I mean, I don't have good genetics, and but I have a very high performance for my age. So even for guys a lot younger than me. So I think most of it is that, the genetics is maybe 20% and 80% is what you do and how you live. So my vision is to bring that to people, to get them to understand that this is possible, that it's worth it, and that it's doable. Today I was out, so I'm in Florida, and it's just spectacularly beautiful now. The weather is beautiful. It's cool. The humidity's not too high. And I was outside, on my bike and swimming and running for 3.5 hours this morning with the total pleasure of just motion and the experience of feeling my body work. And I think that a lot of people, if they knew that, would enjoy it as much as me.
Yeah, and you're a living testament to that framework, which I think is what attracts a lot of people to you and your clinic and what you're doing and all the different, it's just trustworthy essentially because you're living out what you're talking about. I noticed one thing you said, the right thinking, and intermix with like the right lifestyle and the other kind of stuff. When you think of what is the correct thinking about my health, could you expand on that a little bit?
Yeah, there's a there's a cute little story about this very famous king very many years ago, and he was looking for the secret to life. And he put out a challenge to all his people, and he said, whoever can bring me back in one sentence the secret to life, I will give you wealth beyond that you can have. But he said, I don't want you to waste my time either. So if you bring me back something that's just trash, your head's going to get chopped off. So about 100 people took the bet and they went all over the world, and they came back. And at the end, there was a lot of guys with their heads chopped off, and the king had not been satisfied that any of them had brought him back the answer. And there was actually 99 out of 100 had returned, and there was one guy still on his way. And so the king sent a horse to go get him and bring him back faster. And the guy gets before the king, and the king says, okay, you're the last one. You're my only hope. Give me the secret of life. And the guy said, there's no such thing in life as a free lunch. There's no health.
Yeah.
You can't play both ends. There is no such thing. You can't not sleep and be healthy. You can't eat polluted food and be healthy. You can't not take supplements and be healthy. You can't. It's biology. It's a law. You pollute a cell, the cell gets sick. You give the cell the right nutrition, and you allow it to detoxify, and it will be well. And so people have to understand that. Like you have to. There are things that you can do, and if you do those things, and then we all have different genetics. So there's guys that can do better than me, which is great. But we're all working with a set. We all got dealt a hand. And when I look at my father and my grandfather and my brothers, like they got dealt similar hands that I did. And they lived differently than I did, or that I am. And I think that if a person understands that you have gifts, and that if you maximize them and utilize them, you can make a lot more out of yourself than if you don't. And good coaching, good counseling, these are things that can get people to move or to do things where it gets uncomfortable. Like I do a lot of things that are uncomfortable, because if you want to get better, you just have to do it. If you want to stay in a comfort zone, you're not gonna maximize those gifts. I think we were created with a purpose here, and the purpose is to help the most people that you can in the lifetime that you have. That's my purpose. And so if I can do that through teaching people or working with people or trying to set a good example for people, then when I take my last breath, I will look back and say, I got it done. And that's important to me.
Yeah. Life fulfillment and mission, I think, there's just not a whole lot of meaning unless you have that kind of thing going on. It's just like you're going through the motions and living life and trying to avoid pain and find some pleasure, and you're finding your value in that. But without like a mission and a purpose and understanding that, I think it feels a little bit aimless. And everybody goes through phases of life where they feel that, right? And then they kind of find it again and that kind of stuff. Right. So boy, we'll get into kind of some of the new stuff you're working on and some of the tools. And I know everybody talks on like lifestyle and that kind of stuff, but I think it's important to kind of recap, and I want to hear from you. If you had to boil that concept into practicality, there is no free lunch. What would you say are just the fundamental things that people have to be doing that don't necessarily require like all sorts of testing and all sorts of, I know that's the cherry on top, but if you had to boil it down to the basics, what are those?
Well, I think sitting right at the top is sleep. Now, my whole medical career, up until not very many years ago, I was a pediatrician working in a hospital, on call every third night. I could get by on 4.5 to 5 hours of sleep. I could train on that, and I thought that I just could do it. And then I think 3 or 4 years ago, whenever the Oura Ring came out, I bought one and I put it on my finger, and I started tracking what my sleep was, and my scores were terrible. For those that don't know what an Oura Ring is, I noticed you have one on. It's a little device that goes on your finger, and it tracks all these things like how deep did you sleep, and what's your heart rate variability, and how much deep sleep, and all this stuff. And good is above 80, really good is above 85, and they give you a score out of 100. And I'm looking at the ring and my score, so we're running in the 50s. And I have a good ability to sort of mentally overdrive the body. Like I could decide something and then make the body do it.
Yeah.
But that isn't necessarily a healthy thing to do. Now, it might be good in an emergency, or, if you get stuck in a boat and your boat capsizes and you just have to drive yourself to survive. Those are skills that might come in handy sometime. But to live your life that way, I think you're burning the candle at both ends. So I did an experiment, and I decided that for the next 3 months, I was going to make myself sleep in enough or go to bed earlier so that I would get, the scores would be above 80 every night. And what that took is I had to be in bed 7 hours. So I have a early morning swim practice, and I have to get up at about 10 to 5. I have to walk the dogs, and I have a little duties, and then I got to be, then I got to be at the office by 8 o'clock. So I just push the bedtime back. And if I got 6 hours and 45 minutes of sleep, so if it was lights out at 10 o'clock, I could wake up at 4:45, no alarm clock, and my scores would go above 85. The other thing that I looked at is a readiness. So the other scale that's on this thing is a readiness scale. Like, how recuperated are you from whatever you did the day before or the weeks before, so that you can face the new day. And my readiness scores were low. And I decided that I was going to change my training schedule so that I was getting enough rest and I could actually fully recuperate. And so I did that for 3 months. And then that was probably in March of, I don't know, it's probably 3 years ago. And then the triathlon season started in late June. And I had 3 pretty solid months of high readiness scores and high sleep scores. I was very nervous and I was very uncomfortable because I have a coach, and the coach was wanting workouts from me that I couldn't do because it would trash my readiness. And I decided I'm gonna do less working out and keep the readiness scores high. And so I was working out about 25% less than what the coach wanted in terms of distance or intensity. I raced 4 times that summer, and I won my age group in 3 of them, and I came in second in 1 of them. It was the best I'd ever done. And it was like a revelation to me. Like, the coach has no idea what the rest of my life is like. He's looking for heart rate and heart rate variability on a score sheet. And did I get the miles in? But my life is very busy with a lot of other things, with a busy practice and busy family life. And I did better with less, like way better. And I felt better. So I think that sort of thing. So you got to get your sleep. You got to figure out what it is for you. Now, some people might need 8.5 hours of sleep.
Yeah.
There might be somebody with less, but I think if you try to cheat that, and then you're tired all the time and you got a heavy head and then you can't think straight, that it's not ideal. And one of the really important things that I figured out too. So I've been married for 53 years. My high school sweetheart, we were in the first grade class together. Okay. So like, we have been very good friends for a long time. But we have our challenges. And what we did is make an agreement, or I brought this up. I said 2 hours before bed. So if I'm going to bed at 10, after 8 o'clock, no subjects are getting brought up that will get me or you aggravated at all. It's all sort of good roads, good weather. If something's going on with one of the kids or there's some other thing, tell me in the morning. Don't tell me before I go to bed, because I don't want to. I don't want to
relate to that. Your mind just gets going. My wife and I have had that conversation too, because she'll bring up something about work when we're laying in bed. Mine turns on. I stay up till 2, 3 in the morning working on, mentally working on something. And it's like, just can't do it.
So that's been helpful. That's been helpful. For me too, screen time near bed doesn't work either. I can do a crossword puzzle. I can read a novel, but, so I've sort of figured out, and then this latest one has just been fantastic. So we were, about 2 years ago, we installed I read Mercola's book on EMFs. Mm-hmm. And we never had TVs in the bedroom. We don't charge our phones in the bedroom. Like there's no electronics in my bedroom. But we installed this breaker switch in the bedroom, so you can push this button and it turns off all the electrical currents in the bedroom. And we didn't use it because the bedroom's really dark and neither one of us was very certain that we could make it to the bathroom in the middle of the night to go to the bathroom without falling down or running into something. So we just didn't use it. So Joe Mercola, he's over at my house and we're talking about it. And he said, what are you doing about your EMFs? And I said, well, we got the switch in there, but we don't use it and blah, blah, blah. And he said, well, you need to get my friend coming over and have him check out your house. So we get his friend to come over. He checks out the house and the house is pretty good. And he says, let's do an experiment. So I'm laying down in my bed and I have an electrode that I'm holding in my hand and the electrode's attached to a voltmeter. Now, there's no electronics in the bedroom at all. And I'm laying on my bed and my body has a standing wave voltage of 1.4 volts laying in my bed. He said, that's way too high. It should be 0.015 volts. You're like 1,000 times too much than what you should have. So I told him about the breaker and he said, before you touch the breaker, I want you to just reach your hand up to the wall. And while you're attached to the voltmeter, let's see what that does because the electrical circuits are in the wall. So I reached my hand up toward the wall and the voltmeter goes from 1.4 to 18. So it's another 10 times more, almost 15 times the amount of standing wave voltage in my body. Now, this isn't good. So he says, okay, put your hand down. He pushes the breaker. So the breaker shuts off all electricity that goes to the master bedroom and bathroom. And when he pushed the button, I could feel my body just like drop, like, holy cow. And the voltmeter went to 0.03. So every night we figured out a way how to get to the bathroom without doing it. But we turned that on and I have been getting an extra 45 minutes to an hour of deep and REM sleep since I've done that.
Huh. I'm going to have to give that a shot because I haven't worn my Aura. I actually just have a silicone one on right now, but I haven't worn my Aura ring in a while. But I like how you're kind of thinking about it, which is like, because I was thinking about it in the way that I don't need a ring to tell me when I'm awake or tired. But I wasn't making changes to my lifestyle based on the data that I was getting. Yeah. And so I think that's kind of the fundamental difference. And Dr. Jay Wiles, you might probably know who he is, but he's coming out with a new tech called Hanu Health that does really in-depth heart rate variability and will actually make practical suggestions based on how your heart rate variability is changing. So I'm really excited to see that come out. But yeah, that's words of the wise on sleep, because I even had this coach, and he went to the Olympics 3 times for Olympic weightlifting, and he had coached lots of people throughout his career. And this, that was a long time ago that he went to the Olympics. But every time he did it on working out 3 times a week. It blew my mind. And I would ask him, I was like, what else would you do? He's like, nothing, just the 3 sessions a week, 2 hours a session, maybe 3 if it was a difficult one. But yeah. He definitely prioritized the rest mode of the body and was active throughout the day. He had an active job and some other stuff he was doing, but for the most part, he put a huge priority on his sleep and his rest and his recovery, and just bringing the intensity to those 3 times a week. And I found that really fascinating. I so often get trapped up in, I'll burn the candle at both ends, like go to a conference, stay up with people till 4, wake up at 5, start my day, and really unsustainable stuff. But I think when you're looking at longevity and just your overall health and productivity, you're not going to get out of that what you ultimately want to.
Right. At least not too many times.
Yeah, exactly. Well, sleep. That's a increasingly more complicated one with screens and EMFs and that kind of stuff. But I mean, the basic fundamentals: turn off the screen a couple hours before bed, turn off the Wi-Fi. That's what we do every night, and just unplug it when we're going to bed. And those kinds of things are helpful. But I want to kind of transition a little bit into some of the new tools. I know we could talk about that for a few hours and go more and more in depth and, extract a lot of good info. But I'm kind of interested in this therapy called EBOO, extracorporeal blood oxygenation ozonation. How long have you been doing this? Well, first of all, can you describe a little bit of what it is and then explain how long you've been doing it and what you've been seeing?
So this is a device that the machine we got, I think, was developed in Malaysia originally. And it was a way to oxygenate the blood with oxygen and ozone and run the blood through a dialysis-like machine to purify it, so to speak, at the same time. And I heard about it from Asher Milgram. He said something about it on one of the Ozone blog posts. And I called him and he said, yeah, this thing's pretty amazing. And so I bought one and we started to experiment with it. And so it's an ozone treatment and it takes about an hour. A person's connected up. You have two IVs. So one arm is the blood's going out. It goes through this machine. The blood is exposed. Blood's run through some very small pores, which expose it to a filter, a dialysis filter. And then as it's coming out of the machine, ozone gas is added, not high dose, and it goes back into the body. Now, when you see the blood coming out, especially in sick people, it looks kind of sludgy. Sometimes it looks kind of yellowish. And when it goes back in the body, it looks cleaner. And of course, it's oxygenated, so it's bright red. So we started using this on patients, and my practice is mostly very sick people, chronic neurological disease, Lyme disease. We see a lot of cancer, chronic fatigue, and we found that we could make improvements in people quicker doing this than if we were just doing standard ozone, Myers cocktails, glutathione, the sort of stuff that most of us that are treating these kind of people do. And that the patient acceptance was very high. Like, it was very safe. We didn't have any trouble with it. You need trained technicians to do it. But that people would notice it. And sometimes in the middle of a treatment, someone would just remark, wow, my brain just cleared. Like, I can think straight, which was kind of remarkable.
Yeah.
We're seeing a lot of long COVID patients now, which they're very complicated. Some of these are post-infection, some of them are post-vaccine, but there's a whole other thing going on with them now with microclots. And it seems like the EBOO is very helpful at sort of sifting through this stuff. Now, we're doing a lot of heavy anticoagulant therapy in these people. And it seems like the combination of anticoagulant therapy to bust up these microclots, if you look on a dark field microscope at the blood of these people, you see gigantic platelets. And they're just too big to get through blood vessels. And so you have end organs, hearts, kidneys, brains, where there just isn't getting enough oxygen. They're not getting enough blood flow. And the symptoms that you see with these people, this overpowering fatigue and brain fog and the cardiac stuff and blood clots, is that they're not getting blood. And if you are able to anticoagulate them effectively and then do EBOO, do hyperbaric oxygen, like press oxygen to get it into the system, many of these people will just really start to get better within, 3, 4, 5 weeks, when they've been sort of banging their head against the wall and trying to get better for a long time.
Yeah.
So we find EBOO is like key to that too, and you can see the difference. So
Yeah, I find that to be a really interesting topic because it seems to be increasing in its issue, and I don't I don't know if it'll slow down. We'll see, but yeah, so from my understanding, the spike protein from, I don't really want to say the words of the virus and the jab and that kind of stuff so that we can post it on YouTube, but otherwise they'll just pull it down. They do that to us sometimes.
Yeah.
But the spike protein is a word we can say. So is that the primary issue from these things that we were talking about?
Yeah, I mean, the spike protein, it's a toxic particle, and it's engulfed by virtually all of the white blood cell system. So macrophages and dendritic cells and neutrophils and lymphocytes, they engulf these cells, and it produces a very inflammatory response by those cells. So they put out all these different kinds of cytokines, and these cytokines make a hypercoagulable state, and it looks like platelets, among other things, get stuck. And so you see the clumping. Like on a dark field microscope, a normal platelet will fit inside of a red blood cell. That's how big they're supposed to be. And in these people, you look at their blood and you see platelets that are 5 times, 8 times, like way too big. They're way too big. They're hypercoagulable. They don't, well, a capillary is about 4 microns. A red cell is about 7. Now, red cells flatten as they go through capillaries. But if you have platelets that are 7, way more than 7 microns, they're probably 14, even 20 microns, they don't fit through. They sludge up the system. And in the EBOO, you can see it. They come in sludged. You see that blood leaving their arm, and you see it's sludgy. And then you see as it goes through the dialysis filter, or through the dialysis filter, it disappears. It clears it. So it's very dramatic.
Dr. Tom Levy was saying, I don't know if you saw his article canceling the spike protein, but he theorized that like one EBOO session would be able to clear it up. He didn't sound like he was 100% confident on that, but he said theoretically it should clear it up. Clinically, is that what you're seeing, or how many treatments do people need typically?
No, I haven't found it happen in one treatment.
Yeah.
4 to 8, maybe sometimes 12 with these other things. So
And that's with EBOO or just major autohemotherapy?
No, with EBOO, I'd say minimum of 4
Okay.
for most people. And then we're doing hyperbarics at the same time. We're doing a lot of other things at the same time. I don't think EBOO is a standalone treatment for it. And you got to handle their coagulation. You got to handle their platelet clumping, because that's partly EBOO filters it. But if you have too much of these activated particles in their blood, they're still going to be producing this stuff. Okay. So we find that 3-4 weeks of this sort of intensive program, that you can sort of break this open, where the person's like, wow, like I really feel better.
Do you see in your patient base, so say you don't have somebody with overwhelming fatigue and that kind of stuff, but people with like midline symptoms that are having spike protein issues too?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's great for mold patients.
Yeah.
Because the mold, they got all these mold particles circulating around their body, and I think this filtration process does remove that stuff. I think it removes biofilms. There's some stuff on it that maybe it even removes microplastics. So we're sludgy enough that I think the EBOO is a way to get at it that's effective.
Can you explain biofilms a little bit? Because that concept just doesn't, I've heard it a lot. And the cool thing with doing this interviews is I get to play the idiot, because there's a lot I don't know, right? I've heard biofilms, but that concept just doesn't click with me when you're talking about blood. So what are you describing exactly?
Okay. So if anyone just recalls an experience of walking into a lake or stream when you're barefoot, and you step on a rock and the rock is super slippery. It's super slippery because there is some algae, some fungus, some bacteria that took up residence on that rock. And one of its protective mechanisms is to produce a mucopolysaccharide. So it's a slippery protein sugar mixture, which is biofilm.
Okay.
Now, bacteria and funguses and parasites are able to make biofilms. So if you see someone with a massively leaky gut, or you get someone who's been bitten by a tick and they've got Lyme bacteria circulating around in their bloodstream, these bacteria will often produce, as a defense for themselves, biofilms. And they actually end up as little colonies where you have a group of organisms. It's a little cooperative community. They secrete this biofilm, this mucopolysaccharide material, and they're relatively protected from your immune system because your immune system doesn't see them. It's a decoy. It's a barrier, but it's also a decoy. Now, Fry's done some work where he actually went in and looked at biofilms and tried to be able to analyze, like, what is in there, what kind of bugs are in there. And one of the papers he saw, he had like 30 different things. There were yeast species and bacterial species and rickettsial species and protozoans that were all in these they were in the biofilm. So it's a complicated network. And then people with, like I said, they get bit or they got leaky gut or, whatever. They got root canal teeth and the stuff is leaking out of their teeth and it's in relation to their blood supply. It gets in their blood. And then you can see biofilms on a microscope. If you look at a dark field microscope, you can see these things. They're like, they look like spider webs, like dense spider webs, and they're there. Well, the immune system doesn't see them or doesn't know what to do with them because they're not sort of locatable. The signal that the immune system needs, that XYZ colony is a bacteria or parasite, and I'm going to go after it with this or that, or I'm going to tag it with an immunoglobulin so that the white blood cell can go after it. It's not there. And so if you can mechanically filter these things out, plus ozone busts up biofilms. Like you give people MAH or UVBI and you give them, I don't know, 10, 20 treatments, their biofilms you don't see them anymore. They start to break down. I think the ozone just oxidizes the coat off of it, and then they're exposed, and then the immune system does what it's supposed to do. So,
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to cut you off, but you were saying so that with the EBOO, I want to get into the filtration a little bit because that's an area that has, and we don't have to go into depth, or if you just want to say no, that's fine too. But the filtration portion seems to be like not a controversy, but a disagreement on, is it actually filtering out the blood or is it non-selective and just whatever makes it into the bucket. So from my understanding mechanically, the EBOO filter, right? And I'm trying not to get into too much jargon, but essentially the filter is like a dialysis filter, but it's used in a different way. As such, it's not like filtering out the blood like a dialysis filter would. So when you're talking about filtration with EBOO, what's your experience with that? What would you say about it?
Well, I agree with you. I don't think that it's letting the red cells through and it's not letting other stuff through. They don't go through like a micropore filter. I think that the membrane itself in the filter does catch stuff as it goes by. And whether it's an electrostatic attraction or whether it's a mechanical, it traps it, that you end up with a filter that, if you look at the filter, has a lot of gooey stuff on it. Fungus particles, biofilms, different kinds of bacteria. Now, how the fluid gets to the bucket or what that fluid, I don't understand that, but I know that when you're healthy, you don't get a lot of fluid out. And when you're not healthy, you get gobs of fluid out. And that the amount of fluid that comes out, the reservoir that comes out, it cycles a little bit. And I just tell people, when you've had 3 under 200, you don't need EBOO anymore except as a maintenance. So maybe once a month or once every couple of months, you come back in and get an EBOO. But before that, you'll see there might be 800. My biggest one is 2 liters of fluid came through that, was sitting in that jar at the bottom of the machine. Now that person was very, very toxic. And then it gradually came down, and then sometimes it wanders up a little bit and it comes down again. So I say like 3 times under 200, we got the, what this treatment could do for you, we got it. So my 3 times. So when we got the machine, I was the first one to do it. And I was under 200 3 times. And now I'll do an EBOO maybe every few months. Because I'm pretty cleaned out. So, but a lot of people, it's 4 to 8, sometimes 12. And we just do it weekly until, if they can stay and do it, that, with ozone and with the rest of the stuff, that they do get better.
I think that's a really interesting correlation with the amount of fluid in the bucket to how sick the person is, and kind of using that as a gauge. Again, my mind is going to wondering, is that because of selective filtering, or is it possible that we're increasing the antioxidants within the person, so there's not as much, agitation from the ozone and not so much making it into the bucket? Again, I'm just going way off on a limb here, just kind of wondering, because I want to understand that filtration, and we can kind of end it there and move on. But do you have any thoughts on that?
I think what happens is that you've got, in people who are sick, most of the toxins in their body are inside their cells. And that through the EBOO process, you are getting, it's sort of like your cell can't detoxify because the interstitial fluid is too toxic. And the interstitial fluid can't detoxify because the blood's too toxic. And so as you start running the blood through this process and you ozonate it, and you kill some bad guys, and you neutralize some bad guys, that the blood starts to clean, then the interstitial fluid starts to go into equilibrium with that, and that starts to clean. And then eventually the cells go into equilibrium with the interstitial fluid, and that starts to clean. And then the organelles in the cell, the mitochondria and the ribosomes and the nucleic acids, that they then start to clean. And that you end up with someone who progressively, their total body load of all this junk that makes everybody sick goes way down. And to me, so far, EBOO looks like it does it faster than anything. Plasmapheresis probably does it faster. Like, I have patients that have gone to Germany and gotten with super bad COVID or post-COVID, and that seems to be even more effective on that kind of patient than EBOO. But then, they get a lot of plasma. It's very expensive. They still need a lot of treatments. But that seems to be like the ultimate, in my experience, of how do you clean someone out the fastest? And EBOO seems to be like the next best one. Regular ozone is great too, but it just takes longer.
Yeah.
So, 20 to 40, what I tell a new patient before EBOO is it's going to take 20 to 40 ozone treatments. We're going to do a couple of MAHs and a UVBI every week, and you're going to sit in a HOCAT twice a week. And that's about what the average one takes. Some will be 20, some will be 50, but the average is somewhere in 20 to 40. With the EBOO, it's quicker.
Wow. I didn't realize that you were doing that many IVs in a pretty sick patient. That's a significant amount, but that's good. And more is better, in my opinion, when it comes to ozone. I mean, like you said, you're perfectly healthy and still doing it as a maintenance. And on plasmapheresis, I think that's a super interesting therapy. I actually have one sitting right on the other side of this wall that we're looking at, essentially making it more accessible for people, because they're super expensive, but we might need to crowdsource it, because I'll have to put $500,000 into getting one made. But yeah, I think that's a super fascinating therapy. So with EBOO, would you make, when you're comparing it to, let's say, like major autohemotherapy, 10 pass, what are you seeing clinically, and what would you say, when do you interject those therapies, or where do they kind of fit into how you do medicine?
Well, I think I might be a little bit of an oddball on the 10 pass. I bought a 10 pass machine. I tried it. I don't know. We couldn't figure it out. Like we couldn't get it to be a smoothly functioning in our clinic. And I found that a lot of people that we were seeing were sensitive, and you gave them ozone in that kind of dose that it didn't go. Then your dad came down and he had the we call it high dose ozone therapy, and we got that thing and we do that thing, and that was more tolerable for people. But mostly now we're doing MAH, UVBI, EBOO, and I sold the 10-pass machine. I just wasn't happy with it. And I know people get results, so I'm not disparaging the treatment. It's just what we find. I just go by what seems to work in our clinic.
Yeah.
And that works for most people. So I think ozone can be a toxic gas. Some people are pushing on the EBOO, they're pushing the ozone dose up too high, and I think it's too much. My technicians that do EBOO, they see any red in the filtrate, which means that you're breaking blood cells, like we run the ozone low dose. So yeah. Safety is like my primary thing. We're doing things that are not really in the normal realm of acceptable medicine. And so I'm really careful. I just don't want to hurt anybody. And if it takes a few more treatments, it just takes a few more treatments.
Yeah, I think that's the way to do it. And I get people asking about all sorts of different protocols that we could do. And I'm kind of like, well, scale that up to 10,000 clinics. Can I make sure that all 10,000 people are going to do it exactly correctly and not mess it up? I have to make things that don't mess up, because it's not the 99% that do it right. It's the 1% or less than 1% that do it wrong that kind of mess with things. So I think that's a really good motto to have, is just looking at the scalability of the safety and saying, can I do this indefinitely for the rest of my career, and assessing it from that standpoint. So, but the kind of question I 10-pass, I didn't mean to throw that in there because I didn't realize that you weren't doing it. But if you had to compare EBOO and major autohemotherapy, how do those interplay, or when do you use one over the other?
I think some of it's budget driven, because the EBOO is a lot more expensive than a major autohemotherapy.
Yeah.
It also depends on how long can the patients, are they local? Did they come for 6 weeks? Did they come for 2 months? How bad are they? So I'm trying to scale this where it's doable for people in the time they have and the budget they have. And then how sick are they, and what are their expectations? So I sort of put all that in the calculation. Most of the people that we see are major autohemotherapy and UVBI and hyperbaric oxygen. Most of the treatments we're doing that, but we are doing EBOO on some of the real sick ones. I'm just doing a pilot now where I'm going to do EBOO every week on all the we do a lot of cancer treatments. So we're going to add EBOO to all the cancer treatments now. So every week they're going to each get an EBOO. So we're doing IPT, low dose chemotherapy, all these other things. And I want to see now, because I talked to Dr. Keneally out in California, and she's been doing it. And she said, boy, it seems to really make a difference in cancer patients. So this week we're starting to get that going. We're all learning, just like we're all learning I really think that the group of guys, like the people that are listening here, that the more people we have doing it and the more communication we get from people on what is working, what's not working. Like there's so many sick people around that I think that whatever I know, I'll tell you, because there's a lot of intelligent people around and they learn stuff, and then we can learn from each other, and we can just elevate this up to where it's, we have solid protocols that really work in most people, and they're safe.
Yeah. I mean, I'm super excited for ozone therapy. I think it's going to explode right around the corner. We actually have a pretty big partnership on deck. We're talking with the medical board next week. And we'll see where it goes. It could still fall through, but that would add 3,000 clinics to ozone therapy in the United States alone, which would be wild. And that's just one of these people. They also have 4 other groups underneath them that have more. So I'm seeing ozone therapy as potentially going to become really big in the next few years and help a lot of people. So I'm super excited for that. But you're right. It's all the communication, because we're venturing into something and we're, gathering clinical data and trying to figure out what's working and what's not working and what's the best way to do it. And you mentioned like, hey, I'm not running the high dose method of EBOO. I'm running the lower dose, which is like the 3 gamma versus the 55, right?
Yeah.
Yeah. And so all these different things, I think, play a part in that. So if you're looking at adjunctive therapies, are you adding anything directly around EBOO therapy that's been helpful?
We're doing Myers cocktails on people, or super Myers cocktails on people anyway, a couple of times a week. So that's one of the adjunctive therapies. I think hyperbaric oxygen is another thing that we have 7 chambers right now. I'm looking at 4 more. Like, it's another therapy in the same sort of area where you can hyperoxygenate people and it helps them. So I find that combination works well too. And then we're doing all the regular stuff too, is you got to clean up people's gut and you got to handle their chronic infections as a part of this whole sort of mix of like, how do you handle one of these people? And then supplement them. These people are massively deficient in all kinds of nutrients. I've done a lot of work with amino acids. All your patients, anyone listening to this, if you're not giving your patients amino acids, perfect amino, you're missing the boat. This improves liver detoxification by 30%. These guys are all they're amino acid deficient. And if you add those in, you'll just get better results, and they'll feel better, and they'll tell you. So these are things that are just sort of bedrock things that are really important in handling sick people.
Yeah. And I use those all the time. They're phenomenal. So I've been super happy with the Body Health and all the products that you've put out. Been super helpful. And in regards to EBOO too, so it is a higher dose therapy, and some patients are sick. They have a burdened immune system. Do you walk them through some of those other like supplementation, lifestyle detox before you jump them into ozone therapy, or is that kind of at the beginning of your protocol, or how do you handle Herxheimer reactions and that kind of stuff?
Well, we get them. I make sure that they have EBOO is not going to be their first ozone experience. They're going to get some major autohemotherapy or some UVBI, and we titrate that. If I have somebody who looks sick and they tell me I'm sensitive to everything, their MAH is going to be 50 cc's of ozone. It's not going to be, they're not going to get 250. They're going to get walked up this very carefully, because I don't want to make them sick. I don't want them to Herx. I don't want them getting fevers. I hate drama. I don't want any drama in my clinic. I have a big IV room, and I don't want any drama. And I hate it when I have to run in there and do something. So I almost never have to.
Yeah.
I've never had an ozone patient that I had to call the ambulance for, or that we had to really do a resuscitation on it. And we've done, I don't know, 70, 80,000 ozone treatments over the last 12 years. I mean, we've done a ton, and it's just very safe. It's no drama. People do it. And, sometimes you'll hit it a little bit where they say, gee, I didn't feel good when I got home, and it's okay. You're getting less next time. And my nurses in the IB room, they interview the patient every time they come in. They're like, how did you do with the last treatment? Was it okay? And if they get too big a wiggle, the ozone dose is going down.
Yeah, I've talked to people a number of times that titration schedule is just really important, I think, for most people. And even so, if you get somebody, let's say that's like, that felt more or less fine, but fatigued the next day, do you take that as a sign to move down, or is that okay?
If it's borderline, I'll just keep them the same.
Okay.
If it's been uncomfortable for them and it scared them a little bit, or it was a little bit too much, I'll go down.
Okay.
I think you can't hurry this therapy. You just can't hurry it. You have to, you have to work with the physiology that you're working on with that patient. And if you ignore their originations about what happened or how they felt, man, you're going to have trouble. So it's also one of the things that someone who comes is that I discuss with them, look, I can go as fast as your body can accept the treatment. But if I try to push the treatment too fast, you're going to not feel well and we're going to go backwards, because then we have to, we have to fix what we did. So it just works better if we just, it's a, this is working. Can you do a little more? That's working. No, it didn't work. Back it down, so that we really do individuate it. Like you have the patient in front of you and they come with their package of stuff, and their mental state too, because some of these people are very afraid and they're afraid they're never going to get better. And they've been through the ringer with treatments that didn't work, or they've been given treatments that hurt them in their perception. And I just don't want to be that doctor. I want to be, look, you can trust me. You can trust me. I am not going to do anything to you. Now, it may be a little slower than you'd like, and that's going to be fine. But I am not going to hurt you, and you can trust me. And I really want you, I'm trying to improve your overall health. And it's not a speed thing.
Yeah, incremental progress is incremental progress that adds up over time. So that's the key. So if what are things that you wish you would have known about EBOO when you first started doing it?
That's a good one. I think this idea of more residual is equals sicker, because I didn't understand it very well. So I think that's helpful. I think the other thing is that you have to have the technicians that are running this thing. They have to, you take your best person. If you have a clinic now and you have a really good MA or nurse practitioner, that you get your best one on this and that you make sure they know what they're doing. Because these therapies are they're real therapies. And that just technical competence is just like, because you hurt somebody and then the board's coming after you and then the family's coming after you, man, that is horrible.
Yeah, 100%. So is it pretty, like you said, get your best technical person on the therapy? Is it easy to do wrong?
It is, because it's complicated. There's a lot of things going on. There's a lot of tubes. There's a lot of in and out. My office manager is my best technical person. Now, she's been with me for 22 years. She signs off on every person, every new hiree who comes into our IV room. She signs off on, and she's an MA, but if I had to go to war, that's who I'd take with me, because she's really good. And she's a detailed person. And so every person that gets trained in IVs, how you start an IV, how you access a port, how you do the EBOO, they got to go through her brick wall in order to get certified in our clinic. Yeah. And so, that's what I'm saying, that if she thinks they're sketchy at all, or they don't really get it, or they're just not careful, sorry, you can't work here. You can't do this.
So it sounds like the person you're describing is perfectionistic, thorough, and to a degree mechanical, like practical, and they're
good skills, good skills.
Yeah.
And understands that you got someone's life in your hands. You literally do. You suck a bunch of air into that thing and they get an embolus, or they get a big clot. Somebody could die. Yeah. And so we take that like that, if you can't trust the facility and the doctor and the people that are there, then in my opinion, you shouldn't be doing what you're doing, And I hear my patients come back to me and tell me a couple times every week, because they cycle through, is like, your staff is amazing. Like, they cared about me and I knew it, and they did it right, and I knew they were doing it right. And they had an air of confidence and professionalism that impressed me. And some of these people own businesses and they have lots of employees, And so, you know, they know how tough it is to get good staff and competent people. And so when I hear that, I'm just like, all that we put into training and like, this is worth it, because that's the patient experience. And if you give people good patient experience, then you build, you know, you can build big clinics. We have 75 people right now on our staff, and I've got an allocation board for 15 more that I need. But it's got to be the right people, and they got to have the right skills, people skills and technical skills. And it's because people, they trust you, and then they trust you with their friends and their family, and they send them in there.
And for the record, guys, just going to interject real quick. We will have an EBOO machine coming out in between March and June for about the $10,000 price point. So I think it'll make it much more accessible to the clinicians who are interested in getting started with it. And hopefully it brings down the price to the patients as well. And the clinicians will be able to maintain the same margin. So I think it's going to make the therapy more widespread, more accessible to people. And of course, as always, we'll be doing tons of education and information. So you clearly feel, though, that the overall upside of EBOO is worth the kind of technical downside, being the hands-on therapy, a little bit more nuanced. So if you could, you know, say you had oversight to a clinic, what are the things that you're looking at to say, yeah, you're ready to do EBOO?
Well, I think they got an IV room, and they got some experience. You know, they're doing MAHs, they're doing UVBIs, they're doing vitamin C's and Myers cocktails and chelation. And, you know, I think they need to be well-grounded in, you know, just basic IV practice, basic sterility, basic mixing bags. You know, I think this is an upper level treatment that if your people aren't used to the other stuff, they're going to be thumbs and they're going to be confused. So if people have been doing the standard stuff, and heck, you guys got some of the best people training around, that, you know, they got the basic stuff down and they're ready for some more things or some more advanced treatments. Yeah, I think EBOO is perfect, and they should do it. It's good. We've been associated with your family for a long time, and you guys have done an amazing thing at bringing this to a much bigger and broader audience of people and medical doctors and DOs, and you guys are doing extraordinary work. Your dad and I, you know, I'm just going to tell this story. My dad. When your dad developed the first UVBI machine, he came to me. Now, we had an old UVBI machine. We had one of the original machines.
Yeah.
And my attorney was giving me trouble about the machine, and your dad came to me and he was like, "No, you can do this." And he called on me probably 6 or 8 times over 2 years to convince me to buy one of his UVBI machines. And I love your dad, and he just persisted and persisted. And then I don't know how many we've got of them, but we had like, 10, 12 of the machines, and we did tons of UVBI, and then he just was non-stoppable. So now he's got you guys, you know, you've grown up in it and you're doing it, and the contribution that you guys are making to medicine and advancing medicine is enormous. And I so appreciate the work that you're doing.
Yeah, thank you. And same to you. I mean, it's wonderful to have a dad. If there was one thing to describe him, it would definitely be tenacious. Like, just constantly, you know, he has a very practical mind, and I think he is really good at solving problems, and he knows it when he knows it, so he doesn't back down from it, which is a wonderful thing. But yeah, I appreciate it, Dr. Minkoff. So where can people find you or find more information about what you're doing?
Yeah, so my clinic is called LifeWorks Wellness Center. The website is one word, lifeworkswellnesscenter.com. You can go there if you're interested in becoming a patient. We don't do any remote medicine. Every patient that we see comes to us, and you know, you can travel back and forth, but I don't do any remote consultations at all. Our average patient, the programs are usually somewhere between 6 weeks and 12 weeks, depending on the patient. I write, and the website has hundreds of videos on there. So if you're interested in all kinds of the therapies that we do, there's lots of information. I write 2 newsletters. One's called Optimum Health Report. They're free. You can sign up there. I do another one called Body Health Fitness Newsletter. I have a nutrition company. It's called Body Health. And we make Perfect Amino and about another 20 products. And that website too is very full of information, lots of videos, lots of written information. And that's where I kind of hang out. So you can find me at those places.
Perfect.
I read the book. If you haven't, I have a best-selling Amazon book. It's called The Search for the Perfect Protein. If you want to download the PDF, you can do it free on the Body Health website. If you want to buy it on Amazon, it's really good on a lot of the basic stuff, like basic nutrition and lifestyle, and on how amino acids, or the importance of amino acids in improving health. So that's another thing that they could search for the perfect protein, it's called.
And I'm a believer. I've been using it for years. I love this stuff. So I think it's good for people to look into and at least read the book, get a somewhat of a consensus on it. And I should apologize a little bit to the listeners. We used a lot of jargon today. I typically don't like to do that, but I think it was really good because we do have a kind of mixed bag of patients and practitioners and lots of different clinics. So I think we got down into some pretty helpful and useful information. So thanks so much, Dr. Minkoff.
Yeah, good to talk to you.